So hello everybody, welcome to this webinar on how to enhance your productivity using Rails console. So our presenters today are going to be Sam and Gabriel. They're two of our senior developers here at Reinteractive, and I'm just going to hand over to Sam now to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, so I'm Sam, and so as I said, I'm working for Reinteractive, and today me and my friend Gabriel is going to present you on how to enhance productivity using Rails console. So Reinteractive, we are a Ruby on Rails consultancy company, and then we do a lot of Rails projects. And myself, I'm doing Rails for about 6-7 years now, and then Gabriel is also more than 5 years. Then over time, what we have realized is that even when I started Rails, I was not utilizing the Rails tool set as it was supposed to use, but I was mainly doing the normal Rails. I'm going through the Rails application and clicking around to create things and all that, but I could have done those things easier if I had an idea on this Rails console and other tools. So then we decided we will get you some details or the basic details on using Rails console, and then we will show you what are the other options so that you can use it when you do development. So that is what we are going to do today, and hopefully you'll learn something from this. And the presentation we will do in basic 2 parts. The first part will be we will show you what is Rails console and what are the Rails console commands, and then the other part Gabriel will show you on, there's another Ruby gem called Pry, how to use that, and that is sort of the enhancement version of IRB or Rails console. Okay, let's get started. So enhancing productivity using Rails console. Let's start with Rails console. So Rails console and Rails command line, you probably have heard these 2 words before, and we will try to explain what is what. So Rails command line is sort of the main tool. So think of it as a Rails command line is a toolbox, and then Rails console is a one tool in that. So when you're starting a Rails project, when you do Rails new and the options, that is a separate command. And then when you do Rails console, that is another command in Rails toolbox. So today we are going to focus on Rails console command and what you can do with it in your project. So again, about the questions, you can, if you have any questions, there are few options. You can just unmute yourself and then ask the question, and we'll answer your question. And if not, you can put it on the chat window, and then we'll answer that. If not, at the end of this presentation, you can ask your question. So either way is fine by us. All right, let's start. Okay, so the first thing we need to understand is how we are going to start Rails console and how we are going to stop the Rails console. So before that, I will go back to the source code, and I'll show you how the flow of this presentation will be. So first of all, I have a small Rails project, very basic Rails project. So which will have a controller called post. This is a small blog. So you have a post, and then you have comments you can add to the post, and then I will show you the UI of that quickly. So let me know if you can't see it. There should be a web page on the screen. So this is the application. It's a very basic application, nothing fancy. So you get to create project, and then you add title, description should be the like text box. Anyway, so then the author, and then you get to add comments to your blog post. So this is pretty much the application in our Rails install first guide. So what we are going to do today is me and Gabriel will go through the Rails console and show you how to utilize some commands and how to do testing and create test data to this project without always going through this web page or the HTTP page. So I will remove this web application for now, and then okay. Right. So first thing is how to start the Rails console. So you have two ways of starting the Rails console. So one is you can do Rails console, and that will fire up your Rails console. So the Rails console command lines will be in this left hand side, and then the project will be in the right hand side, so in this side. So that is one way of starting the Rails console, and please let me know if I'm going too fast or switching between windows too fast, and if you can't follow up. So that is one way of starting the Rails console. And to exit the Rails console, you can type exit, and that will just go back to the normal shell. So instead of writing Rails console, this entire console command, you can do Rails C. Rails C will do the same thing. That will start the Rails console for you. And then about the stopping, there are two options as I listed here. So one is you can press Control D, and that will exit from your Rails console. And the other one is you can, as I did before, you can type exit and press enter. So then the other one is starting Rails with different environments. So why we need different environments? Let's have a quick, so I'll basically tell you why we need different environments. So in standard Rails projects, you normally have three environments. One is called development, where you do normal code changes and development of the project. And then there's another environment called testing. That is where you run your automated testing, and maybe if your project is running in a different testing server, that is the environment you use for that. And then you have the production environment. So the production environment is where the normal people use your system. That is the live system. So to do some stuff or do some commands, you need to pick your environment to start with. So if you want to do something, or if you want to test something in production, if you want to quickly do some quick checks on production environment, you need to start your Rails console in production environment. Same as for test, and then same for the development. So the syntax will be, you start with Rails C or Rails console, and you give the environment. So let me show you how you can do it. So about the environments, I'll show you where the Rails environments are. So normally in config file environments folder, you have three different environments. You can add multiple environments here as well if you need to. Right. So let me exit from the Rails console and close this. And then if I want to, so when you do normal Rails C, that will open up your Rails console in the development environment. You can see it here, it's a development environment. But if you want to, let's say to start the Rails server in testing environment, sorry, you can do test. Testing, no, test maybe, yeah, test.
Hi, Sam. We just got a question. Are you able to zoom a bit your text, because the text file, the font size is not big enough. Some people are not being able to see it.
How about now? Is it better?
Yes, it's better.
Okay, cool.
No worries.
So again, I'll do that again. So what I did was I did Rails console, just like we are normally starting Rails. And instead of starting it in the default environment, which is develop, I gave the environment name to start. So that way it will start, so it says loading test environment. So that is how you can use Rails console to start in different environments. Let's go back to the slides again. And then now these are the commands that is more useful. So let's start with this one. So I think by now, if you're doing Rails, you will be familiar with the active record. So the active record is the library we use to communicate with our database. So we save records, we retrieve records, and edit and all that. So you can interact with active record commands via Rails console. So if you want to create a post, you don't need to go to that web page and click on new post and then go to the post form and add details and click save. You don't want to do everything, and you just can go to the Rails console and create that. So I will show you a few commands, but pretty much all the active record commands you can write it on Rails console. So let me go back to the console again. And let's say if we want to get all the posts in the table, I'll first have to go to Rails console, and I'll do post.all. So that will return all the post records in your database. So that is same as if you go to post controller, it is same as this line here, line number 7. Then the other one is, let's say if you want to create a record, let's say you want to create a post, so you do post.create, and then you give the parameters that you need to pass. So in my case, it's title. I'll give a title something, and description. I'll give a description again something, and then author, that is that's my name. So when you click this, it will create a new post for you from the Rails console. So that way you don't want to go to the form and create a new record. The cool thing with this is you can do this as a loop. So let's say if you want to create 10 posts, you can do 10 times. This is the normal Ruby code, Ruby loops. So you can do 10 times and then just create this record. So see, it created 10 records. So for an example, let's say in your view, if you want to check pagination, and you need to create 20 records to test the pagination, instead of going manually and creating 20 records, you can use Rails console to do that for you, and it will be faster. And especially this comes handy when when your project has some sort of a testing framework and fixtures like Factory Girl, you can use Factory Girl to create records for you. So you don't need to go and create everything one by one. Then yeah, so that, and yeah, so you can use find command. You can use post dot find, and this is me finding the post by ID1. Okay, so there's no ID1. Let's say 2. All right, there's 2. So it's pretty much like whatever you have in this controller, you can do it in the Rails console. And so that is about active record commands and how you interact with the Rails console. And then the next thing is how you navigate through commands. Like probably you have written the command before and then you need to execute the same thing again. So how you do that? So for that, let me go back to the Rails console. And so how you can do that is you can go up and down from your arrow keys. So I'm pressing the up arrow and it will go to my previous command. So that way, if you have already, if you want to use a command that you have already done or you already executed, you can do this, or you can do Control R and start in the command, start typing the command. So that way it will show you the command, and then you can select it from there. So there are 2 main ways. So those are the 2 main ways of searching the history of commands. And then there's another good feature or that Rails console gives you is command autocomplete. So what I mean by that is you can start typing any command and hit tab, and that will show you, then the Rails console will show you what are the options you have, and then you can see what command you need. So to show this, I'll go back to the Rails console, and let's clear this out. And so to clear the Rails console, you can do Control L, and that will clear your Rails console. So if I do post and let's say at this point, let's say if I do find, and at this point I can't remember the exact syntax, so I can hit tab, and that will show me what are the commands that I can use. So in this case, probably I'll do find by, and find by title or something, and I can do that. Or just find or anything. So it's basically auto completes the commands for you, and then you can pick whatever the command you want to execute. That comes handy when you can't exactly remember the command. Personally, I don't remember all the commands, so I do something like this and then go from there. So that's about command auto completion. And then this one is, again, I think Gabriel will agree with me, is one of the commands that we use a lot. This is the underscore. There's a special meaning for underscore in Rails console. So that means if you, in the underscore, it acts as a variable and it will save your last evaluated expression. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So normally what happens is, at least for me in most cases, I do something, I check something Rails console. Let's say I do post dot all, and then let's say post, I want to get the first post and I want to update something. So I do this, and then I realize to update this, I need to assign this to a variable, and then only I can update. So, but when you run this, I forgot to assign it to a variable. So what I can do is I can now assign it to a variable doing this, because this underscore is holding your or storing your last value evaluated expression. So if I do this, it will be the post object. So that way, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to chime in and say this is especially useful when you're doing like very big queries and the line that you worked on before is huge, and then you're gonna have to go back to the start to assign it to a variable. It helps you a lot and saves your life, that you don't need to keep going back and forth with your cursor on that huge query. You just assign the underscore to it because it stored the last value.
Yeah, correct, exactly. So yeah, so this project is a very simple project. You don't need to go through Rails console to do this, but the idea is these same principles can be applied when you're working on sort of complex projects. So yeah, so then that comes really handy when you forgot to assign your the expression to a variable, and if you want to use it on some other part of your the Rails console. Then the next thing is reloading the Rails console. So why we want to reload the Rails console? There are so many occasions that we need to reload the Rails console. So one main thing would be, let's say you do some sort of a code change and you want to make sure that code change is applied. So then at that point, once you do the code change, Rails console will not know that you have done a code change. So you need to tell Rails console, okay, load up the code again, because I have changed the code. So to do that, you have to reload the Rails console. Let me show you an example for that. So what I'll do is I will try to create a new post. So okay, before that, I'll go to the post model. And you'll see that I have a validation to here. I have validation for description and title, and I don't have a validation for author. So let's say in our project, we get a new requirement. So let's go with the current setup. We'll do post dot new, and we do post dot valid to see whether the post is valid, and then it says false, and then we'll see what are the errors we get from this post. So the errors will be the description is blank, the title is blank, but currently it's not checking if the author is blank. So let's say, for an example, we get a request from the client saying, okay, we need to validate the author as well. So what we can do is we can add this author here, and then if we try to do this again, now we have done the code change, right? So we do the same thing, and we check the errors, but still author is not here. The reason is Rails console doesn't know that you changed the code, so you need to reload the Rails console. So once you reload the Rails console, you do the same thing, valid, and then you get the errors, and then it says the author is blank. So that way you don't need to fill up the form every time and test it on your browser and see what are the errors you're getting. So that saves a lot of time, especially with complex objects, and if you want to test those kind of things. So that is reloading the Rails console. And then this one I've shown you before, so I will skip that one. Basically, you can use Rails console to create test data. So you create this. I'll quickly go through this. So you create an object, and then you just save it. So as I showed you before, you can do it through loops, and yeah, so you can even get an existing object, update that and use it. That is yeah, you can use that comes handy when, let's say, if you're debugging something and then you get a database backup from staging or something, and if you want to log in as a different user, you will have to update their username, because you can't go and ask that user to give their password to you. So those kind of scenarios you can get the user object and update it in your local and to a known password and then use it. Right, so that is to create test data, and then test data, and then the helpers. So again, with Rails projects, we have a separate folder called helpers, and normally when you create objects, you sometimes create helpers for that. Helpers are basically to do some formatting or to do some display display options to the user. I'll show you an example that will be easier. So I have this helper here. So this is basically to display the post title and post author in one line, instead of just doing post title. So let's say in the index file, I can do display title here, and instead of just doing the title, it will now show title and the author. So the only thing is, if we change this, or if you want to change this, or if you want to see what is the output of this one, currently if you're not using Rails console, you have to go to the page and then see what's going on there. But let's say all you need is to see what is the output of this method. So in cases like that, you can access these helpers through the Rails console. So how you do that is, you do helper. Helper is an object where it stores all the helper methods, and then, so in this case, you need to pass a post object. So if you just do display title, it will give you an error. So let's get a post. Right, we'll do this. Post dot class. So we do have a post now. So what we'll do is, when we do display title, we'll pass that post, because the display title method requires a parameter. So it gives me back the output. So that way, I don't want to go through the web page and to see if my helper method is returning the value I want. So that is how you can access. So you can pretty much access any helper, Rails helpers or the custom helpers that you develop for your project. And the same thing for routes. So let's say you're working on this project, and then you are working on this view, you're debugging something, and at this point, in this line, there's this thing called new post path. And by looking at this, maybe you need to understand where this path is taking your view, or what is this path is routing to. So to check that, you can test this path or this route in the Rails console itself. So to do that, you need to do app. App is again like instance object, Rails object, just like helper, and you do app, and then you do the new post. So new post path. So that will tell you, okay, it goes to post new. So you know what's, when it comes to here, when the user clicks new post, where it redirecting to. So you can check it from the Rails console itself. And then, so you can check any route and even the complex. This comes really handy when there are complex routes with nested resources and all that. So you can easily understand where the page is going to redirect. The next thing is to do HTTP requests from the Rails console itself. So without running the Rails server, you can use Rails console to do basic HTTP requests and to see what you're getting back. So if I go back to this console again, and if I do app get post get, and you do posts, I think that's right, yeah, post, and it will title first post some error, but okay, post title something, but yeah, so you it will, so what it has done is it sent a request to your Rails server, and then it returned back the reply. So don't worry about this error, it's something else. But so you'll get the post request here, sorry, the get request here. So that way you can use post dot, let's say, to get the post here. I'll do it again. So you can execute a get request post to, and then it'll get you the post. This is the get request. This is the parameters you're sending. It's pretty much like you're going to the post show method. It will execute the same. So to show that, I will do post. I'll go to post controller, and in the show method, I will just add a print statement. And when you do this now, see, you'll see the print statement. So you can change the code and then execute this. So this will come handy. The other part of this presentation, Gabriel will go through another library called Pry, where you can use Pry to debug your code. And with combination of a debugger like Pry, this will come really handy, because when you do this, and if you add a debugger here in your right hand side in the code, it will stop your request chain there, and then you can start debugging from there itself. So that is doing HTTP requests. And then this is another very useful command. So this is where we can get the source location. So the idea of that is, let's say you have a method, and then you are doing some sort of a debugging, and this is, since this is a very small project, doesn't make sense. But let's say somewhere in the project it calls some method in another object, and you can't exactly sure where that method is. You can use this command, source location, and in the Rails console you can see where the method is. So let me show you an example. So in my right hand side, I go to the post model, and then in the post model I have this method called comments count, which is an instance method. So let's say I don't know where this method is, and I see someone, the post object has called this method in a control or something. So if I want to check where this method is, I can go to Rails console, and I can issue this command. So I can do post, and since it's an instance method, I use instance method and comments count, and it'll give me the source location. So it will be in this path, this file, this post file, and line number 6, which is this one. So I can easily navigate through the source code, and then I can see where the methods are. This is really helpful when you're working on a really complex project, so that you can navigate through the methods and see where the methods are faster. And then about executing shell commands, this is not like things that you will do every day-to-day development, but if you want to execute any shell commands, you can use Rails console to do that. For an example, if I want to list the directories, I can do clean this, and I can do this 2 backticks and then the shell command. So it will give me the list of files in the current directory. That is executing shell commands, but you're probably not going to use these shell commands as you use the other commands through Rails console. Then the last part is, this is another very important command, the sandbox mode. So the idea of the sandbox is, when you start your Rails console with this sandbox mode by giving this sandbox parameter, it will remember your changes, what you're doing to active record objects and all that. And when you exit your Rails console, it will revert those commands back for you. So you don't need to do anything. You can do any changes you want, and then you exit the Rails console, and your Rails console will revert back your commands. Good example of this is, let's say you're checking something in production database, and then you don't want to delete any data from it. Just, you might be checking something and accidentally you might delete something. So that is not good when it comes to production databases or any sensitive data. So what you can do is, in cases like that, you can start your Rails console with sandbox mode, and then sandbox mode will revert back your commands once you're done with it. So let me quickly go through an example. I'll start the Rails console with sandbox mode, and then I'll do post.count. I'm going to show you the count. 13 posts are there, and then I'm deleting all the posts. So it's all deleted, and then I exit the sandbox mode. So see, it says rollback transaction, and then if I go back to that, and again, if I get a count, it will be the same 13 posts, because that has rolled back the changes. So that way you can make sure that you're not going to destroy your production database or any sensitive database for that matter. So that is the sandbox mode, and then with that is the basic Rails console commands. So I've shown you the Rails console commands without using any third-party gems or anything else. This is pretty much you're getting out of the box when you do Rails, when you install Rails. So the next section, I will get my friend Gabriel will explain you how to use pry and how it is some sort of a superset of Rails console, and how you can use it to enhance your productivity. To you, Gabriel.
Thanks, Sam. Sure, thanks, Sam. Before I start with it, does anybody have any question about what Sam just presented? You can unmute yourself to ask, or you can just leave a question in the question box. And just a minute. Can everybody see my screen? I'm just going to show 135 gem for the console, like you asked, and I'll give an overview about it. So pry. Pry is, what is pry? Before we answer what is pry, we need to know what is IRB. IRB is the interactive Ruby shell. It's a REPL for the Ruby programming language, and it's basically when you run Rails C, you're entering IRB, which is a default Ruby. It's default in the Ruby library, but with your entire application environment loaded. So IRB is the REPL for Ruby that you can test your commands and everything and run Ruby interactively. So with that in mind, what is Pry? Pry is a more powerful alternative to IRB. It does the same things. It does exactly the same. Oops. It does exactly the same thing as the. I mean, I shouldn't say exactly the same thing. It does everything that the normal Rails console in our IRB does. So everything that Sam showed you before will work with Pry, but it does more. It's built from scratch to provide a range of more advanced features. Some of them being listed here, but it's not limited to. So you can do source code browsing, including the C. The core C library for Ruby, documentation browsing. You can open methods in your editor, syntax highlighting. You can run command shell. There's command shell integrations, which we're not going to cover today. We can navigation the state of the application, and we have a runtime invocation, so we can debug using a developer console. What we're going to focus on today is the source browser. I'm going to try to go through everything. The source code browser documentation, the navigation around state, runtime, invocation. So how would we install Pry? So installing Pry is easy. You just run gem install Pry and prydoc. Prydoc is necessary for the source code navigation. And basically,
this is running on, okay, you're gonna show it. Okay, cool.
So basically, when you're here, you just go gem, install prydoc. It's gonna do its thing. It's gonna install, and I have that already, but apparently it installs again. Once you install Pry, you can run Pry, and it's as easy as after installed, you just call Pry in your console. So if we go do Pry here, it's here, and we can do everything that Ruby does. 1 + 1 = 2. Other things like hey. So anything that a Ruby program can do, it will do here. It's a REPL. The one thing you can do is you can run Pry, load Pry, and preload your own script files in it, but we're not going to go into this detail today. We're just going to cover it with the standard Ruby library and Rails. So some of the features for Pry that I like and I'm going to cover is one of them being state navigation. So think about it as you can navigate your code and your classes and modules and instances as if they were folder structures. And you can also list methods in those classes, modules, and instances as if they were files in a folder. So here we have an example of the state navigation use ls, which is the same ls as the folder structure. When you do, we have here ls array. It's going to return a list of methods of this array. So instance methods and class methods. Alike, it's listed because you ls into a class. You can ls into an instance of that class, and here on this example we create an array and then we ls in the array. The difference between both is that it's not going to show the class methods, but it will show all methods of any mixin that was included. In this case, the enumerable module is included in the array, so it will show all the methods here as well. So these are all the methods that are available for you to use with an array. You can also CD into your classes and modules as if they were folders. So let's use this example. For example, we have this module, my module, that has 2 classes inside, and let's just keep here. So we have module, my module, with a class, my class, and class, my class 2. And so if you want to look into the my class, because it's namespace under module, you'd have to do ls my module, my class. It doesn't work because my class. Because I missed out here, sorry. It didn't show anything because the class doesn't have anything inside, but the point here is that if you want to ls inside the class into my module, you need to namespace all the time. If you're working inside my module already, what you can do is cd inside my module. You can see here that it changed the context to inside the module itself. So now if you do ls, you can see the classes that are inside the my module, and then you can just do my class and it will do its thing. This example is very bare, doesn't have anything inside the class, so you can't see, but basically you can see the inside of it and come out as if it was a folder, as the example shows here in the as well. Once you are inside the folder or the class, or you know the method that you're looking at, you can use a method called show method, which basically you can bring the method definition without going and searching for the source code. And in this example here, we are using the array dig method, and it returns, if I come here, a show method array dig, it will return a lot of things. It will show where the method comes from, which is the array.c file. It's a C method because it's the Ruby standard library. It's written in C. The owner of that method is the array. It's a public method, and there are 9 lines of code. And it also shows the actual definition of the method here. This one is C. But if you are on a Rails project and you do the same on one of your own methods, then it will come as Ruby. A companion of this method, this is good for you when you want to know how something is written and you don't want to go looking for on GitHub or anything, trying to find the source code. A good companion for this is the show doc, and you can browse the documentation without looking at the source code as well, or on another website or something. So when you do the same here, but with show doc instead of show method, it will show the visibility, the owner, where it comes from. It will also show the signature of the model, the method, sorry, and the number of lines, but these are the number of lines that the documentation has. And then it will have here an explanation of what the method does and examples. Just one point here, it will only work if you wrote documentations for it, if there has metadata for documentation, like with rdoc or ri. And most Ruby core libraries has it, so it works. But if you do on your own methods, it will probably not return anything, because on a big Rails application, people usually don't use rdoc for documentation. And that's the basic things for Pry without Rails. Now, Rails and Pry. Myself, I started with Ruby through Rails, and I write Rails most of the time. I rarely write a plain Ruby library or something. So using these with pry with Rails is what I do most of the time, almost every day. So to install within your Rails project, it's easy thanks to the pry Rails gem. You go to your gem file, you add the pry Rails gem, you add the pry doc if you want to see documentation or the source code that you need that gem. The one important thing is pry Rails needs always to come before pry doc on the gem file. Otherwise, it will raise errors when you try to run the console. So after you bundle your application, it goes into Rails C. Before bundling, you're gonna see that it shows IRB main. After bundling with that gem, you're gonna see that it's pry main. So basically, instead of using IRB, it's gonna use pry, and then you can enjoy all the pry goodness in your Rails project.
So Gabriel, that means your default Rails console will be pry thereafter, right?
Yeah, that's it. And then you can use all the methods that pry have, so you can, but inside a Rails console, inside a Rails project, so you can access everything. See, if you are in a big project that you just started, but you didn't write it, like that project, and you just start working on it, and you need to know how something is written, you use the show method. For example, I have the same blog that Sameera showed, I have here with pry already installed. So if I go into there's the helper display title, was that it?
I think that is, I can't remember. Display title, I think.
Yes, if I do the show method here, it will give me where it is, which file it is, which line, and all the other things. This way you can just open, you know exactly where to find that method. And that probably will save a lot of time trying to looking around for where things are. There's another thing you can do with it, which is a bit out of the scope of this talk, but I added just so you can go through, is you can debug use binding.pry. So when you add binding.pry to your code, it creates a breakpoint, and from there it opens a pry session to you on that specific point. The run time stops there, and you have all the state of the application available to you, so you can access variables and everything you want to check how it is at that point in time. So if we add the breakpoint to the display title helper on that blog, when we run, we find a post, and then we run that method. Instead of showing directly instead of showing the result that it should, pry is going to stop like this, and it's going to open another console for you here. And if you just exit, it will run as it should normally. But you can go and see, you can run post.title and see what that variable is. You can see environment variables and all those things. Another cool thing you can do is you can manipulate data inside that session for tests. So if you run that method again, and then it's going to stop here on the breakpoint, and then before it finished running, you run post.title equals not the original title, it's actually going to apply those changes. And when you run exit, it's going to keep running the project. It's going to show not the original title and the post author name instead of showing the original title and the post name as it was. And that's pretty much an overview of pry. I'm sorry I rushed a bit, but does anybody have any question about it? And also, would anybody want, like, if you could show a show of hands of a follow-up webinar on pry itself?
Yeah, pry itself is a big scope, so yeah, if anyone interested.
I see there's a question there for you, Sam. About,
Sorry, Rachel?
I see, Sam, there's a question there for you. What are third-party gems for Rails console?
So there are few. So one is, of course, the pry can use as a alternative or the extended version of console, and then gems like pretty print and all those things, and then this one called bullet to check the queries. Do we have n+1 dependencies and all that? So there are few gems that will help the Rails console to extend the Rails console. So yeah, those two is the main things I can remember right now.
Also, Pry itself has plugins that can be used on it to extend. Pry is already an extension of Irb, and you can use Pry plugins to extend Pry even more. So yeah. Does anybody have any other question? It looks like we're good. Well, thanks, everybody. I'm done with my part. Sam, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Not really, no. I'm good. And if anybody looks like no one has any questions, so yeah, I'm good. And just I want to thank everyone for showing up. And yeah.
Sorry, Jenny has a question, and I'll answer that quickly. There is no gem for syntax highlighting. It by default it already comes with syntax highlight. Pry comes with syntax highlight. At least it should. Post. So can people still see my screen? Yeah. So here, if I come post.last, I'm in the wrong console, sorry. If I come here and post.last, it comes with highlighting already. If I go here and I try the show method helper display title, it will use the Ruby syntax highlight. So yeah, by default, it comes with some sort of syntax highlighting.
There are few syntax highlighting gems. There's one called Code Ray, and I'm not sure how active the developments are. But yeah, as Gabriel said, Pry comes with syntax highlighting, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Cool. So yeah, thanks everybody that was present here, that attended the webinar. I hope I could answer some of your questions. I could help you learn more about something that you didn't. And yeah, just hit me up or Sam if you need something. Our Twitter handle is somewhere at some point on the start of the presentation.
And I think one last question from Justin. So do you often search the core Ruby docs via Pry docs, or do you use other sources more? So personally, I use Dash. There's a third-party tool where it shows the documentation. Yeah, so that is my primary tool to go through the source codes. But you can use Pry, but personally, I don't. Pry is not my first preference.
Yeah, in my case, it's basically if it's a standard library, if it's Ruby or a Ruby or a Rails method, then yes, Dash is a good thing. But if you are in a project and you need to know a method that someone wrote for that project, it's an internal DSL, then yes, I would use Pry. But that's mainly if you're starting with the application, you don't know your ins and outs in the application. So yeah, it's a mix. It's not always Spry. Sometimes it's even me going into GitHub itself and to look at the whole scope of the class itself. So yeah, Pride is a start, I think, and yeah, it's a mix of everything. Awesome, everybody. Thank you very much. Rochelle, do you have anything else to add?
No, just thank you for attending. And when we end this webinar, there'll be a quick survey, just 6 short questions. If you'd be able to fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. So thanks for attending, everyone.